Hello, friends. I hope that you've all had another fantastic week serving your students, serving one another. For these next few weeks of virtual all-staff devotions, I'm going to be sharing some thoughts from Paul's letter to the Philippians, which is widely regarded as one of the most encouraging writings in the New Testament. And Paul had a clear fondness for the church in Philippi, and it's obvious when you read his opening remarks. This is Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 to 5 and verse 7. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for all of you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. It is right for me to feel this way about all of you since I have you in my heart. I'd like for you to think back through your own Christian history and identify a few people and events that significantly influenced your own spiritual development. Who was used by God to help you develop your walk with Christ? What events helped shape you into the follower of God that you are today? I'll give you a moment just to think about it. On my list, there are 4 or 5 names of close friends, mentors, teachers, and 2 or 3 significant happenings in life, some positive and some challenging, that have shaped my own spiritual development. I hope you have in mind now a couple of examples of your own. Now let's go back to Paul. He had good reasons to have strong feelings for the church in Philippi. He encountered some important people there, and some influential things happened to him there. Now, you can read all about his first visit to Philippi in Acts chapter 16, but here's the highlights. It was there that Paul met a prominent businesswoman, Lydia, and a group of God-fearing women praying down by a river. Lydia and her household responded immediately to the gospel, and she invited Paul to stay in her home. Paul basically helped start the Philippian church in her house. It was also there that Paul was imprisoned after incurring the wrath of a slave owner when he cast a demon out of a female slave. But while he was praying and singing hymns in prison, an earthquake broke open the prison doors. And because Paul chose not to escape, the jailer and his household came to faith. Following his initial visit to Philippi, Paul would return to minister there at least 3 more times. The church began to financially support his ministries to such a significant extent that he would brag about them in his second letter to the Corinthian church. So when Paul writes, I thank my God every time I remember you, he really means it. How many people in your life do you thank God for every time you think of them? And how often do you reflect on those significant moments in your history that were influential turning points in your spiritual journey? One of the reasons that I really enjoy meeting our new faculty and staff each year is hearing all the unique stories of how we ended up here in Hong Kong. Our family's story is an 11th hour decision to move halfway around the world. Your story may involve years of discernment and investigation, or you might be somewhere in between. But we all have significant people and events in our life history that contributed to who we are today and to where we are today, both spiritually and physically. In the Old Testament, the ancient Israelites would often set up an altar, just a pile of rocks, as a marker to remember what God had done for them at a certain place. And anytime they traveled by, they would be reminded to stop and reflect back. We also should take time to reflect upon the spiritual markers in our own lives, remembering the places, times, and important people God used in leading and shaping us. When I find myself discouraged or uncertain about the future, I found that looking back over God's providence in my past is a great way to find encouragement in the present. So I invite you to think about your list of names and events and reflect on God's goodness to you in the past. Maybe you might want to follow Paul's example and journal some thoughts and memories, or send someone a note of thanks and prayers. But reflect on how God has brought you to where you are today. Now, next week, we'll take a look at a very famous passage from Philippians chapter 2. And until then, I hope you all have a fantastic weekend.